Okay, we're live.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the November 1st AADL Board of Trustees special meeting. If you wish to make a public comment, you may leave it on YouTube chat or email us at ask@aadl.org or leave a voicemail message at 734-327-4245. All comments received will be read at the end of this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Karen. Welcome, everyone. Have we taken attendance?
Yes, we have.
Thank you. I would like a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Molly.
Seconded.
Thank you, Scott. Any discussion about the agenda? Don't see any. So I will just say we are here to primarily to speak with our search consultants. Karen Miller, Brian Hare have joined us, and they're going to take it away in just a moment. So can we please have a vote to approve the agenda?
Trustee Ekman?
Yes.
Trustee Kleinman?
Yes.
Trustee Leah?
Yes.
Trustee Moore's not here. Trustee Solomon?
Yes.
Trustee Trudeau?
Yes.
Trustee Vanderbrook?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Well, that moves us into discussion of library director search. And I'm going to hand it over to Karen and Brian.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. We don't want to take up a ton of your time, but we thought it was pretty important to talk you through the timeline a bit so that you know what to expect going forward in the search process. So we will do that and try not to belabor too many details, but at the same time be available to answer any questions you may have. My apologies to the few of you that have already heard this, because it will sound very familiar and you may want to recite along with me, so feel free.
I should mention, when Karen says that the search committee has had a preliminary, which is the executive committee, has had a preliminary conversation about the timeline in committee. And so Dharma and Kareen and I were able to have a preview of this before we bring it before the full board.
Correct. Thank you, Jim. So typically speaking, in a search process, what we try to do is start off by gathering as much information as possible. And so our plan is to do some focus groups as well as distribute surveys. The board/search committee has probably already received, I know that you have already received the link to respond to the survey that we provided, and also the staff. We've been seeing lots of responses there too. I know the last time I looked, there were 30. So people are responding, which is terrific. That's helpful. We're getting lots of information that way. We're also going to plan to schedule some focus groups to gather more of the same type of feedback. We use that information between the job description and the other kinds of foundational documents that you have available, and all of the feedback that we gather through those two methods, we will use to draft you an announcement that we will share with the search committee, the executive committee, to review and edit as they see fit. And then the goal is to have the advertisement approved, fully edited, ready to go for distribution by Friday, December 3rd. So we're gathering that information now. We're going to continue to work on, scheduling focus groups, etc. And then we'll have the advertisement presumably approved by December 3rd. And that's recommended, just as recommended for approval. Once that announcement is ready to go, we will post it December 6th, and then we will recruit actively for this position between December 6th and January 23rd. And that is a decent amount of time, of course, but we do use that time wisely. Keep in mind also that December can be a bit of a dead month. So we definitely want to make sure that we're taking advantage of time available to recruit good candidates for you and make sure that we're getting the word out successfully. The way we typically manage our recruitment strategy is that we will start with your state, and we will connect one-on-one via email primarily with as many of the professionals that we can identify and connect with as possible. Asking not only for if they're interested in the position, but if they have anyone they would recommend if not, or both. So we kind of come at that recruiting method from two prongs. So we will gather nominations, reach out and contact with anybody who gets nominated for the position. And we will certainly continue our recruitment strategy beyond Michigan to the surrounding states. And of course, when we're posting the announcement itself, we post, I think, somewhere around 55 different places where we post the position across the United States. So definitely between the recruiting and the posting, we should be getting a lot of mileage and airtime and visibility for your position being open. We're planning on closing the position January 23rd. And at that point, we will have asked your applicants to provide a cover letter, a resume, and then also to complete and return a questionnaire that will be specifically tailored to your recommendations or your requirements, et cetera. And so from that standpoint, we will organize and create a candidate list, candidate matrix, some supplemental documentation to kind of help outline the skills and abilities of each individual that has applied, and then provide all of that information as organized as we can to the committee to review. They will have access to that information briefly for about, not briefly, but for about 10 days or so with us with us shooting for a, well, actually, we've already approved this. Well, not approved it, but we've semi-approved this, where we have decided on Monday, February 7th for the meeting that we will have with the committee to evaluate and kind of hone in on the candidates that are most qualified. After that meeting, it's a 2-hour meeting that the committee will participate in. After that meeting, we will narrow things down to semifinalists, and then semifinalists will be invited to participate in Zoom interviews with the committee on February 21 and 22. And we have reserved 4 hours each day for that. So we're looking at afternoons. And so we will have done phone conversations with each of the qualified candidates before that meeting where we have our first discussion of candidates with on the 7th. And so we will have gotten a little bit of extra information beyond what the committee has had to read. So we will be sharing that verbally as well. And then the semifinals, like I said, February 21, 22 in the afternoons. Those are usually 30-minute interviews. We haven't decided specifically on a time yet, but that's what we typically lean on, is around 30-minute interviews where they are kind of back to back over 2 days, giving the committee an opportunity to have had a small interaction with each one of those semifinalists. And like I said, we're shooting for around 6 to 9 individuals, generally speaking. And we will have supplied draft questions for the group so that you can edit and exchange or rearrange or augment in any way desirable prior to those semifinal interviews. And then hopefully we come out of those 2 days of interviewing with 3 or 4 finalists to recommend to the board for further interviews. Once we have identified and have fully determined who the finalists will be, we will commence working with the full board on another set of draft questions that would be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more, a larger list. And we would encourage you to see maybe for 45 minutes to an hour or so the finalists in the board interviews in person. We will do references for the finalists in between having identified them and then the actual in-person interviews, which we are hoping to have March 17 and 18. That is a date that is still outstanding simply because it requires all board members, so we want to make sure it meets everybody's needs. So that's the one set of dates that we need to kind of work with the full board to verify that those are acceptable and that they work. What we would do with those 2 days would be, and keep in mind, we reserve 2 in case we need them. We may not need them, but that's okay. We reserve them, and then we can always, as we go further along down the process, we can decide if you need both days or not and release one if need be. But we certainly like to have them in reserve just to be safe. Some of the activities that we typically like to do at that stage would be things like giving staff opportunity to interact with the finalists and provide feedback, giving any stakeholders that you have interest in including in any kind of Q&A process. We're granted, nope, we know who the hiring authority is, it's the board, but at the same time giving other groups such as staff and stakeholders those opportunities to interact and then provide feedback that we would summarize for the board in preparation for your deliberations. When it comes to, I'll stop there and say we will do references for the finalists, and those are written reports that we would provide to you. And we would have to, we usually have them to you within a couple of days of those final interviews. And we ask each finalist for 3 specific references. We will ask them for someone they have reported to, someone who has reported to them, and then someone who has worked with them in a collegial capacity. And we'll have phone conversations with those individuals, summarize those conversations in a report, and get those to the board for additional information and background. They're very useful, I think, and you can kind of really hone in on details in terms of what's their communication style, how do they manage people, those kinds of things. It's really useful. When it comes to the final interviews, then we would, as I said, collect feedback from anyone who interacts with the candidates beyond you, so that you have that feedback to help you in your evaluation. Trying to think what I'm forgetting. We do recommend that you make the offer contingent on a successful background investigation, which is included in our fee. So we certainly would handle that for you. We can work with you to, we can be your representative when working with the identified finalists that you choose to make an offer to, if you wish, or we can work with your attorney, or we can go directly through your attorney, whatever works best for you. So just bear in mind that we are flexible about that. We're flexible about a lot of things, but certainly that, is a way we are flexible. And that background investigation usually takes about 5 business days to complete. So keep in mind that you won't have an immediate answer right away as to, first we have to see if they accept the offer and then get the background investigation completed before you'd want to officially, appoint this person into this position. I ran through that very quickly, but I wanted to just sort of give you a chance to get a taste of what to expect and then see if you have any questions.
I wonder, Karen, if we could zoom in a little bit more on final interviews and what we discussed, what we wanted to kind of propose as the format for those 2 days.
Sure. One of the things that we talked a lot about was doing a presentation component. Is that what you're referring to, Jim?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And we think that that's a great opportunity for you to see your candidates in a little bit different light. Instead of just answering questions, what we would do is recommend that we determine a topic in advance that you would want to have each finalist prepare a presentation on. Give them the opportunity to prepare. We usually give them that topic as soon as possible between semifinals and finals so that they have plenty of time to prepare. In COVID times, we have definitely strongly recommended that those presentations take place via Zoom on an online platform, just to make sure that we don't accidentally create some sort of super spreader event. However, we can see where we are by the time we get to March. Maybe things will be much more clear-cut and simple, which we can always hope for.
And to clarify too, regardless of,
Format.
Circumstance, we do expect to see candidates in person for the final interview, if not the presentation component.
Yeah, I would agree. So certainly, however that takes place, in terms of format, we definitely would encourage you to have the presentation. I think that you would really benefit from it, being the library size that you are. And what we would do is suggest, maybe a time frame. So a lot of times what we see are candidates will do a 10 to 12 minute presentation that includes an introduction of themselves and then is focused on a topic, something fairly broad along the lines of, so what would the library look like under your direction in the next 3 years? That might not be an easy topic to try to formulate on right now. And you can certainly think about what you think you would want someone to present on. I encourage a broad topic as opposed to a very narrow topic, but we have also seen instances where, we've asked a candidate to just identify two or three points in the current strategic plan and talk a little bit about where you could see, the future going in terms of those strategic plan points, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of options out there, and you can think about that, but that's kind of where we like to see a much more broad. You're not looking for the right answer. You're looking for a presentation style and how they connect with an audience and things like that. So that's certainly how we see the presentation in terms of what it gives you. And certainly we would do those. Those are usually held, if in person especially, the evening before on March 17th. So we would definitely want to use both days if you're thinking presentation.
Mm-hmm. So I think that when we start to look at calendars, what we're looking for is everyone being available the evening of the 17th,
Mm-hmm.
and then pretty much all day on the 18th. And
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the flow, the 17th would be spent with the candidates kind of meeting everyone that they needed to meet, and it would culminate in their formal interview with the board on Friday. So all the candidate, however many finalists we choose, all will be here simultaneously, meeting with departments, meeting with any folks that we deem necessary for kind of like short, meet and greet and kind of get to know you interviews. And then the formal interview will culminate with the board on Friday.
Sure. And I will clarify that we are very specific to not call any interaction that's not the board interview an interview, but it's easy for people to think of them as interviews because they're structured similarly. We do like to see sort of prepared questions asked the same of each candidate, even if it isn't the hiring authority doing the question asking, simply just to keep things level playing field. You're getting the same information from each individual. There are a lot of times when people ask us, well, what about more of a social event or something a little bit less structured? If that's something that the board strongly desires, we certainly can accommodate that, but we don't necessarily recommend it. It can get hairy when it comes to, accidentally asking inappropriate questions, illegal questions, that kind of thing. And so we're really trying to protect you, which is why we don't necessarily recommend that particular strategy. Although, like I said, if it's something that's really important to you, especially in your community, we completely understand and we'll do our best to work with that. So I feel like I zipped through that really fast. Does anybody else have any questions?
Karen? I was
Yes.
gonna just add too, I think one other component of that presentation is like a Q&A. After each candidate is done with their presentation, we then field questions from the audience, whether that be in person or online. They sort of get same thing filtered through Karen or I, and then so there's a kind of less formal kind of back and forth with that audience as well.
True. We still moderate the questions just like a town hall, but and what we do on the virtual side is we have each candidate gets about a 30-minute window of time where they would do the presentation, and the rest of the time that they have available would be used to ask and answer questions. And when we do them in person, it can be a little bit more intense in that we have typically had all finalists there together. They take turns doing their presentations, and then afterward they are seated as a panel at the front of the room, and then we moderate questions that way. We don't do it to be intimidating or to make people uncomfortable, but it's really the most effective way for all of you to see them back to back and really truly compare them without losing track of one person versus the other, and certainly manage your time in a way that is, it would be very stressful for you to go through 3-4 presentations and each one, people in and out. Although we have, at one point, we did manage to do kind of mini presentations for a client where we brought one in, they did it, and then they also were asked questions, kind of like the virtual version, but in person, where we just sort of secluded the other ones. But in all reality, it's a fairly public process, so it's not going to hurt anything if they see each other. They usually know each other, or at least have heard of each other, generally speaking. So. Library profession's very friendly, generally speaking. Any questions?
Jamie, you had your hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss something?
No, it's okay. And you answered it. That's what I was going to ask about. So people don't, like, people are used to there being more than one candidate. Like, I guess I want to make sure that that's a comfortable thing.
I'm not going to call it comfortable, Jamie. What I'm going to call it
Fair
is
enough.
a fairly standard practice.
Okay.
It's kind of like I have heard of that happening in academic situations as well, but and it's not I don't enjoy putting people through that at the same time, but I just know in terms of just managing your time as a group, so many moving parts, and we're trying to manage their time while they're present with you because they're taking time off of their current job. So we don't want to have them there for 3-4 days while they're, while one person's coming in, another, it gets really complicated if we try to do it differently. So that's how we ended up that way. Molly.
Go ahead.
I'm curious about sort of hammering down the dates, those March dates. We just scheduled our biggest event of the year on the 21st, which is the Monday, and there is no way that I will be able to do
that much time
on the Friday before that. And so but I also don't want to like throw a huge wrench into this whole process. And so I'm curious about how the scheduling works. But I would love to pin it down as soon as possible so that further things don't start impeding.
Agreed, Molly. And that's why we wanted to bring this to you today, because we know that these are important dates for all of you, and we want to make sure that we're getting something that works for everybody. There's not a difficulty whatsoever. I'm pushing that out to the next week if we need to. I'm going to double check my schedule just to make sure I am not crazy, but I think
The only thing I know of is a conference, but that's negotiable, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that it's a
PLA. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
I was going to say, it feels. I don't think we want to be making this decision without a full panel, and that will be, we will likely. I mean, this is also a question, and I know Karen, we talked about this a little bit, but it's likely we will deliberate and decide on that day. We will not. Not walk away and come back because it leaves it too open-ended in a number of different ways, both from an open meetings perspective and also from the kind of proximity bias and getting too far away from the interviews themselves to make the decision.
And the momentum too. Like, I think it also makes a difference with candidates. There's that excitement of having been there and in person and interacting with all of you and that kind of how exciting that is. And then the further you get away from it, it feels almost like, oh, that was nice, but I can just go back to normal life. So we definitely want to maintain your momentum as well. And I do think that, Brian, that's a good point. The one thing that we do have that next week is PLA, which will affect pretty much any candidate that you would have. I would expect, because that's the big one. And that is the 23rd through the 26th.
But I don't think that we could easily, I think, push earlier in that week. We have a finals on the West Coast the week before, but if it's if we move a day or two earlier in the week, that's feasible. And I wonder if anybody else had anything in that week that they're looking at now, thinking before we settle on anything.
Yeah. So certainly we encourage you to take your time, do a poll or whatever you need to do to determine as a full board what date, whether the 17th and 18th does work, which it sounds like it probably won't. But keep in mind that we could do the 21st, 22nd. And keep in mind also, it can be hard on people, but we can certainly do weekends if need be. Like we are very flexible. When I know I keep saying that, I'm going to have to stop saying it or come up with some new synonyms, but that's the name of the game. We want to be as available to you as possible.
So we are all here. So the 21st won't work because that is the date of Molly's commitment. So it would probably have to be the 22nd and the 23rd. I don't know when PLA starts.
It starts the 23rd.
So that won't. I think what we should do is maybe send out a poll with the range. What's the earliest date that you would recommend?
Really, the earliest date is the 17th and 18th. We'd have to adjust all the other days upward that have already been kind of determined if we move that, if we get too close to the semifinals.
I will just remind everybody that Josie's last day is the last day of February. And I think that, you know, the goal, we're not trying to, you know, I'm not trying to rush the process, but I think like as short an interim period as possible, the better. And we know that, so just, you know, just saying that like every week we push off is another week for, you know, another week later that a new person potentially starts. And we can expect that, you know, depending on who the candidate is, that the person could potentially be relocating. They could be coming from another state. They might be coming from here. We don't know. And that it just, you know, you get my point. I'll stop talking.
I just want to also throw out there that the Ann Arbor Public Schools vacation is the following week, so March 28th. So that's not necessarily an issue for any of the board members, but it has the potential to be for several of us. So
I'm going to be out of town all that week. So
Yeah, I think we should avoid that. I know we need to do this as quickly as possible, but I do think we should pick a date that feels comfortable for everyone. Or my friend keeps saying to be a friend to your future self. I think that as much as we want this to be done as fast as possible, we should pick days that are not going to make one person totally stressed out and miserable. Because I really think it's important we're all super there for this decision.
Well, and keep in mind also that if we have a little bit of extra time between the semifinals and the finals, that just gives us more time to plan and prepare and to help, you know, with the staff, you know, with their assistance, really put together something that will be really nice for all of you to experience as well. We tend to do this on a pretty rapid time frame, of course, but I like when we can have a little extra time because it's really nice to be able to kind of really spend the time doing a good, you know, like a really nice job and fine tune things. Whereas instead of just sort of like, here you go.
So is it possible? I mean, it just seems like, so in my situation, like I indicated in the executive committee, is this far out. I mean, I can pretty much commit to anything. And I imagine like some of us might be in that category where others aren't. So like maybe we could just identify the couple people that actually we should be kind of scheduling around because they have more constraints. Would that help? Because if you send me a poll, I'm basically going to say, yeah, it's all fine.
I would suggest that I really do not want to push this out any further than the first full week of April. And that and it doesn't have to be Thursday, Friday, but I do think that we might want to just look for, and remember, we're looking literally for a single day for every person, an evening and a day. So if it is, I mean, we could consider, here's a question just to kind of back up again. Is it feasible, Molly, to do the evening of the 21st? Can you be present the evening of the 21st? Or is it, that's just off the table?
We just scheduled this, but it's, okay. We've got like multiple people coming in from around the country and it's a whole.
So I just wanted to double check that. And so then I think what we're looking for the week of the 4th is like which combination of days is probably preferred. And I don't know if you all, Karen and Brian, want to tell us about your calendar the week of the 4th.
It is clear as a bell.
Well, bing.
Oh,
like that. I
just walked away with the baby who pooped. And the 4th, I have to run a conference in Chicago. No. How
about the rest of the week?
I'm talking about the week of. So I need to know like what. So you all have so Karen and Brian have a pretty clear week. And so if we were to orient ourselves towards that week, it is possible for our consultants.
It is very not possible for me.
Okay.
I have to
The
be
whole
in
week?
Y'all
Chicago
are gonna
running a
have to go
conference.
and do some soul searching because we cannot push this another week into April. It's just not possible. We all have professional commitments. So if we're looking at a weekend, we can look at that. I don't need to be the heavy, but like we're gonna have to start looking for dates between the essentially between March 17th and April 8th.
And the week of the 28th is out, did we say?
That's
Scott's
spring break.
traveling that week.
Who is?
Scott is traveling. that week.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So not to get too mired.
That's Ann Arbor Public Schools spring break,
Mhm.
which could just cause a lot of problems, like with stakeholders and staff members. I mean, that week is just not a good week
vacations.
because it's going to be like everybody going on their first vacation ever after the pandemic is finally over, because it's going to be over in the spring.
And the week of the 21st is bad for Molly, right? Because you've got,
I mean, I could do the latter half of that week. It's really just the 21st, the whole day of the 21st. I'm not available, but then the 23rd through the 25th is
PLA conference.
So for PLA, like if you were a candidate to be a director, you would skip PLA, right?
Well, if you've got a conference presentation already, that would.
It's already scheduled.
Yeah.
They'd have to bail on that to do that. So it's certainly possible.
Maybe we could lose people.
That's what I'm thinking. I don't like to. We accidentally once did scheduled a final interview that was the same week as ALA, and I thought, oh, we could probably skate by. Nope, we had 3 people withdraw. We had to we just rescheduled. Yeah.
So I realized that in terms of moving things around, the 17th is basically the earliest, but I could literally do the 16th to the 17th as opposed to the 17th to the 18th. Because like it's the 18th is the day before this huge thing. And so I feel like I can't be unavailable that whole day. But I think if we bumped it a day earlier, I can be checking on things on my phone and make it work if it was the 16th to the 17th. So although the 17th that's Purim. So
yeah.
I don't know.
and was there a reason why we weren't doing it earlier in that week, like 14th, 15th, or?
I think they said that the 17th to 18th is sort of the hard earliest that they could.
Okay.
But I do think we could do the 16th and 17th if that did work. Brian, you're not seeing anything on your schedule, are you?
Just my birthday.
Oh, that's right.
I'd be glad to be there with you all.
Either way, yeah. So the 16th and 17th is a possibility.
Okay.
It was a good suggestion.
Yeah, like I said, it's Purim, which is maybe not ideal, but I also recognize it's a more minor holiday, and so like it doesn't affect me. And St. Patrick's Day is the 17th. That's a great time to come to Ann Arbor.
Well, there you go.
Sarcastically.
Oh, that's kind of what we were talking about the last time. That's true. We were talking about all the barf in the streets.
Yeah,
Just
exactly. Okay, so that would have to be cleared with, then we have to go back and look at Corinne's schedule, since unfortunately she is not with us tonight.
That is doable.
I think that that's going to be, and then the week of, the week of March 28 through basically April 1st is APS break. And Jamie, are you basically saying you're offline the entire week of April 4?
Yeah, I'm the co-chair of the conference. I feel like I'd be a crazy person.
Okay. All right. Well, frankly, looking at that, our best bet is to try to shift to the 16th and 17th, and you all should light a candle that that Corinne is available that day. Otherwise, we're talking about shifting this whole process an entire month back. So just be aware. And if that's the case, then so be it. We'll start looking at the week of the 11th
Okay.
of April. Okay.
If we have to do that,
Yeah.
does that shift the earlier date? Like, is there like an ideal kind of stacking of the dates? You know what I mean? Like, we don't want the semifinalists to be like a month and a half before the finalists, right?
Mhm.
So we would have to kind of adjust.
Well, it also may impact the announcement too of the post, because it doesn't make sense to post in December if we're not going to interview till April. I would guess.
Yeah, and actually, we would want to really think about whether we could kind of cascade those dates a little bit later, not insanely later, just in terms of like what we worry about mostly is just losing momentum at each stage. So we try to minimize that, especially once the position closes. We use that time. Sometimes people get kind of frustrated by the fact that we want to post a position for 6-7 weeks, but that part, we do use that time wisely. But then afterward, we do want to try to keep maintaining a certain level of momentum just to make sure we don't lose people, because, if they have already updated their resume and have written a cover letter, it's a lot easier to apply for something else. Trust me. Once you've got that all updated, it's like, oh man, what else is out there? So we've seen it. Like sometimes people will be like, oh, I didn't realize I just happened to look at your website and I just applied for this job, but I also think I might want to apply for that one. And so we've just gotta keep the movement. It'll be okay if we need to. If you guys need to go into April, it will be okay.
And I would add too, like that candidate presentation is sort of that critical juncture where we feel like, okay, it's closed. And then from there, we'd like to keep that 5 to 6 week window. And so the time before that could be the time we could shift if you guys have to fall into later April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So Karen Wilson, can you shoot out an email to Corrine right away and just see if we can make this shift. So essentially what would happen is evening of 16th and then full day 17th.
I will do that right now.
Thank you very much. And then we'll know what we need to do next. This is really, I know it's like so tedious to talk about schedules, but there's a lot of like non-overlapping availability here. So
just think how crazy it would be if we tried to talk about it in March.
Exactly. And for now, everyone, please be holding on to the evening of the 16th and the day of the full day of the 17th.
That works.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, that's really what we wanted to talk about tonight, was to try to kind of hone in on these dates so we can get to a point where we have an approved timeline that we know we're going to stick to the best of our ability, and then proceed from there.
So looking at the timeline that you sent out,
Mm-hmm.
the full board, that's the only time that we have to be available
Mm-hmm.
as a group. Obviously, we'll like be available.
Well, and I do think, there is one other stage that we need to insert on our timeline, and that is atypical, but it is normal for you all. Once the search committee has interviewed those 2 days of semifinal interviews, they will need to recommend the finalists to the full board.
Mm-hmm.
And so that step needs to be inserted there, which I do think is one of the reasons we had a little bit of extra wiggle room in there than compared to before.
So the search committee interviews the semifinalists,
Mm-hmm.
and then would that be during like would that just be an item in the new business, or would that be a separate board meeting?
So
Well,
that's a little bit open question right now in terms of just like our how to do all of this in relationship to Open Meetings Act. And and whether or not that's a sort of, we need to seek legal counsel for this entire plan. So we haven't done that yet. In part, we're discussing it. And that will be one of the things specifically that they will look at, which is to what extent can search committee meet candidates for a semifinal, because it may all need to be done publicly in terms of how it relates to the Open Meetings Act. So I will just say that there's kind of a question mark there. And once we seek legal counsel, we will have a clearer idea of that particular portion. But in an ideal scenario, that would be your search committee only having those interactions with the candidates and then coming to a full board meeting to recommend the finalists that would come for in-person interviews in March or April.
And that would be when they'd probably become publicly known as finalists.
Correct. Yeah,
because it would be
the
brought into
ideal. Whether or not how we read the Open Meetings Act would support that is question for legal counsel. And I think that there is another step in here, which is when we get when the search committee, meaning Jim, Dharma, Kareen, receive candidate documents, everyone will receive candidate documents as well. Though we will be doing the filtering process with Karen and Brian to be able to make the recommendations around the finalists.
So we will all see
the
semifinalist materials. Is that what you're saying?
You'll all be able to see all information for all applicants.
Jim, I did take a quick look at Michigan law. I do not profess to be an attorney whatsoever, but we have done other work in Michigan in the past, and it seems like we've seen it interpreted a couple different ways. Some very, very strict to making sure. Well, and keep in mind, we did work with a board that did want to do the full process as a board, which of course meant everything was open. But I did see that in the I had this up. Where'd it go? In the Open Meetings Act handbook, it talked about going into closed session where did it say that? It said you could do it, you could go into closed session if somebody requested, if one of the two parties requested to go into closed session to be discussed.
Yes, and so that would be also the candidates asking for confidentiality, which is, if you guys will think back to when Dykema visited, that was one of the exceptions that they put forth in the conversation, which is if the candidate requests confidentiality, we can have confidential discussions about them not in public. I think it's best that we the next stop after this is for the search committee, the executive, which is now the executive committee, to take the schedule and have a consultation with council and Karen and Brian, just to pass it all through the filter, and then we'll understand finally, kind of what their opinion is on what we want to do here.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to tease it all out in this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I was just thinking about it when I was thinking about our meeting today. I thought, I'd really like to kind of get a better grasp on that. But I've seen things interpreted in multiple different ways. So we'll just see what your attorneys have to say.
Yes, and we will.
And so I just want to make sure that other than maybe a special board meeting or a regular board meeting, there's no other time that the whole board needs to find time to, or you're just not sure. The answer is you're not
still
totally
working on it.
We can say that definitively, and there are probably a number of reasons, is that there could be twists and turns in this process. And the executive committee is going to work, as best they can to make recommendations and, take care of some of the detail work in committee, but we just don't know. So we will know more soon. And I think like this is the ideal, and essentially getting us to those final interviews is the most important component. It's possible we get a legal opinion that says, actually, no, you can't have your search committee do this in closed session, or you can't do it in closed session at all. So we will find that out, and they may have some other recommendations that they want to make. The other thing that I would like to do is try to get as close as possible to a job description by the time we have our November 22nd meeting, our regular meeting, so that if there is any final feedback that the full board wants to offer on the posting itself, we can do that in that meeting that has already been scheduled, so that we do not have to call another meeting to discuss the job posting and the position description. So in this period, it would be really, for everyone, take the survey. Karen and Brian are delivering various surveys. We have a couple different plans to kind of gather input information, but that we get to the 22nd and actually have a draft review. I don't think Karen and Brian, I don't think you need to be there for that. Okay. I think that we can look at a draft, and I am happy, and the committee is happy to like communicate any kind of revisions that we think we would need before we go fully public.
That is ideal.
Yeah.
That way you don't have to try to rely on our schedules, because things are chaotic.
May I interject here, please?
Yes.
I've heard from Corrine, and the 16th works for her. However, the 17th, she is not available, but the 18th works for her. That's what I have.
Thank you, Karen.
Yep.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Okay.
Welp.
Please write her back and tell her she needs to clear her calendar for the 17th. And then she doesn't have a choice. Okay. Well, that puts us on the week of the 11th. So just as an action step, let's have Karen do a doodle, Karen Wilson do a doodle poll after, or scheduling, however you want to do it, Karen. I don't need to tell you how to do it. And just help us understand what the best combination of dates is for people the week of April 11th.
Keep in mind, Jim, something to keep in mind if this really gets too difficult to schedule. Mm-hmm. We can go back to the possibility of a virtual presentation, mm-hmm. which would not have to be that evening. It could be a couple days earlier. We don't want to interfere with anyone's travel plans if they would be traveling from out of state, for example. But certainly, let's say we did interviews on the 16th. We did any kind of staff interaction and stakeholder interaction on the 15th, mm-hmm. and just did the presentation earlier in the week virtually. Just keep that in mind. That's something we can do.
Okay.
And I'm just going to put out there that Friday the 15th in the evening is the first night of Passover, which I think should be something that we don't schedule over. So most of that week is fine.
Good
but
point.
The evening of Friday the 15th, I think, has to be out of April. But the rest, other than that, we're good.
Got it. All right. So Jim, if you will let us know where you land on all of that, that's great. And then as soon as you know that, if we do make any adjustments, if we end up moving more toward an April date, no problem. But I think we should go ahead and look at the other dates proceeding just through the executive committee like before, and just see if there's any adjustment to be made.
So I think
if need be.
So I think what I want to poll on, and this is for Karen, is can people make themselves available on the evening of March 14th for digital presentations? And then I would ask everyone still hold on to the 16th, since we know that Kareen is available that day. And then
Do we know that she's available that day? Because didn't we say that it would be an evening? I guess I'm just, because I thought we
We
said,
did say evening.
yeah.
I don't know about the day.
Okay, well, let's find out. Let's pull on the 14th as Karen has suggested. And then let's look at combinations of dates between April 11th and April 14th.
We'll find a way.
I think Passover and Easter like kind of correspond this year, right? So that's
They
also
pretty much always do. Yeah. Because Easter's lunar. So they
sync up. All right. Great. So we know what we need to do in terms of schedule. And we've talked through the sort of tentative plan. Would you, Karen and Brian, talk about what you have planned at this point for front end kind of engagement activities and surveying?
Yes. One thing we talked a little bit about trying to gather feedback from particular individuals in the community, and we're going to work with Josie to kind of identify those individuals, figure out how we can either bring them together as a group or a couple groups, something along those lines, or in some way connect with those individuals. And then also we thought it would be really great to get some feedback from the board. But what we want to do is, instead of trying to just to make it more comfortable and obviously I know that scheduling can be chaotic. So we thought maybe we could pull two of you at a time to have conversation. It would not take a lot of time, maybe 30 minutes, but giving us a chance to just have some conversation with you, just to get a sense of your expectations in terms of, I mean, not expectations so much as just your imprint. You know, what are things that matter to you as a board member individually in terms of the future of the position. And we'll use that information to help us as well. And we've developed surveys for the staff and board, but we've also developed a community survey. I meant to tell you, Jim, that if you want to, we could also even put that right on your social media and on the website if you want to get feedback that way from the public.
Like the community survey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's worth saying out loud that we want to distribute that community survey via like the weekly
newsletter,
weekly HTML newsletters. And maybe do that for the next few weeks or whenever you need it. And I also think it makes sense to do it through social, but that's, I think, Josie, you can think about where and how that makes sense. I guess that Rich would be doing that effectively, right?
Well, yeah, Rich would be doing the social media and also the newsletter. So I guess my question about the newsletter is the responses are going to go to Brian and Karen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that library staff are going to have to collate or
anything.
Okay.
Link. Yeah,
that's fine. I just need to, I'll be asked. So I want to make sure I have the answers, right?
Right.
Just so you know, that weekly newsletter goes out to about 15,000 people. I don't know that you need to send it out 3 weeks in a row. Just saying, but putting it on social and different at the same time, making sure people know about it at the same time. I think you're going to get a good response. So.
I think, Josie, I think there's a kind of whether or not people reply or not, I think that there's just a perceptional thing that we want to communicate to the community, that like we are looking for feedback and that it should at least be highly visible for a few weeks.
Understand. I just wanted to make sure they know how many people receive it. That's all. So it's a lot, but I get it. And no objection. We'll do it. It's not a problem. So you'll tell us if 2 weeks is enough.
Well, we recently did a very public community survey for another library in the Midwest, and we had an incredible turnout. But the news reporter accidentally got the link wrong somehow, and we got lots of emails and calls just from people of the public wanting to know why we didn't provide them with a working link. So we'll just want to test it first just to be
Well,
safe.
this will be our newsletter, not local media.
Okay.
So we will get the link right.
I have no doubt about that, but I just
Yeah,
thought it
we'll
was
get the link
funny
right.
that, yeah. I got a lot of calls that week.
But if Brian and Karen communicate to me about what they need and when, I'll make sure the people at the library who need to do this everybody's prepared to do this and do this
Right.
well. So, yep.
You'll probably see an email tomorrow morning because
Okay.
I've been thinking about this, trying to kind of
Okay.
get everything assimilated. So yeah.
Okay. That'd be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions or anything that anybody needs to, floor is open. Let's put it that way. Okay. Well, I will stop being awkward and just
I
glad to
had
have
one
been able to see
question.
you.
I had one question because, is PLA in person this year?
I don't know.
Brian saying yes. That is huge. You do not want to conflict with that then if it's in person. Yeah, that is huge. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Because that'll be the first one in a while.
In a while. Yeah.
There is a lot of engagement and work on the front end, and there's a lot of engagement work on the back end. As Karen has reminded me several times now, when we've talked, getting through this front end process of engagement and getting the posting and the job description going, we will then be able to sort of step back and let Karen and Brian do what they do, bring us some great candidates, and then it will kind of whir up again later in the winter. So we're getting close to the point where everything's just going to start happening, which is really wonderful. And we're get to the exciting part, which is to look at some really great candidates. I will just say, if you have you all open line to Karen and Brian, and I think you know how to find them, but if you don't, please let Karen Wilson know and she'll give everybody email. Maybe Karen, just remind everybody with email addresses and also with phone numbers too.
Putting it in chat now.
Terrific. And then just so everybody has that, and really, Brian and Karen are at our disposal throughout the process. What I'm planning to do now that we've talked is to try to set up a time for Brian, Karen, and I, and potentially if one other member of the search committee, to join with our lawyers at Dykema to just to kind of look and analyze everything so they can issue us guidance. And if I'm not able to do that before our meeting on the 22nd, we will certainly do that before the December meeting. So I hope to give you an update on that as well too. All right. Any final words before we move on in the agenda here?
Not for me. Good job, everyone. We'll get this figured out and we'll get us plotted on a course. It'll feel pretty automatic once we get through this initial hurdle. I promise, Jim.
I'm not concerned. There's nothing that drives me crazier than scheduling, because there's never a good time to do anything, it turns out, when you have a group of 7 amazing, busy, working professionals, parents, and community members around the table, because everybody wants a piece of us. So,
there you go.
Bravo. All right. So thanks a lot to you two. With that, I'm just going to move us along in the agenda. And I think that I've lost the window with the agenda, but I think that just takes us back to citizens' comments.
I have not received any citizen comments.
All right. If there is nothing else, then this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for your time, Karen and Brian.
Thank you.